As little girls and boys, we look up at the glowing angel that gave us life with love and adoration. But for too many, this is not a happy reality. For many, the woman holding us is a true monster. These are their nightmares. Delve deep as we unravel the turbulent bonds between mother and child. You are listening to Monsters and Mothers with your host, Betty Wild.
Hello again, this is Betty from Monsters and Mothers. I would love to give a little shout out to my new favorite group on Facebook, True Crimes for Housewives, where hilarious housewives love to talk about titillating crimes. Thank you guys, I've enjoyed your group. Today's monsters that we will be talking about is Lindsey Lowe, Kris Rezireksyon, Elizabeth Escalona, Mollie Shouse, and Chacon Dooley. When you think of evil moms, you might get the image of someone with a cigarette hanging out of their mouth, their hair a mess, and a woman severely under the influence of alcohol or narcotic substance, spewing hatred as she storms her grounds. Lindsey Lowe sported cardigans and pearls and looked as though she had spent brunches at the country club. She sang in the choir, at church, was a college graduate, and was working at a dentist's office while living at home with her parents. She was there for her mother and nursed her through a brain tumor. Is being perfect a curse? Can the pressures of not making the family look bad become a playground for murder? On March 19th, 2013, a jury found Lindsey Lowe, a 26-year-old Nashville, Tennessee woman, guilty of murder for smothering her newborn twins. Two gifts that deserved so much better were found discarded in a laundry basket. Lindsey Lowe made a grave error, and due to postpartum psychosis was convicted of felony murder, premeditated murder, and aggravated child abuse. She was immediately sentenced to life in prison by the judge. At trial, jurors saw a video of Lowe telling police that she had given birth alone on September 12, 2011, in the bathroom of her parents' home on a quiet cul-de-sac in an upper-middle-class neighborhood. You can almost picture the privileged life Lindsey had been accustomed to. Lindsey Lowe is a college-educated woman, not a 16-year-old on welfare without any hope or means to take care of herself. She is living at home with her mother and about to give birth in secrecy. The bodies weren't found until 2 days later. A family member discovered one baby dead in a laundry basket at the home in Hendersonville, 20 miles northeast of Nashville. When police arrived to investigate, officers found the second body under a blaze sheet in the same basket. Lindsey became good at hiding secrets. She hid her affair that she was having from the judging eyes of her family. Lindsey was engaged at the time and in a sexual relationship with her secret lover. She became pregnant during this affair and became panicked. She hid the pregnancy from her family and friends, and the defense and prosecution offered competing arguments as to why. Which makes me wonder, what are Lindsey's mother and sister like? You see them grieving for her, and at no point was Lindsey comfortable enough to pull one of them aside and say, I have a situation and I'm in need of help. Or simply, just lie. Lying is way better than murder. And guess what? It's easier to live with a lie and confess later than to take the life of your flesh. According to the police, the mother said she didn't tell her family she was pregnant, but she believes that she got pregnant in January and never visited a doctor. Did no one think it was weird or unhealthy that she was rapidly gaining weight? Police interviewed Lindsey, who said she went into labor while on the toilet at her parents' home. She said the first baby fell into the toilet and began to cry. Lindsey said that the baby was crying and she did not want her parents to hear and find out about the child. Lowe said that she put her hand over the child's mouth and that she kept it there until the child was dead, which was a couple of minutes. Those had to be painfully excruciating minutes. A few minutes later, Lindsey gives birth to the second child, who also falls into the toilet. She again put her hand over the baby's mouth and held it there until the baby died, which she said took less time than the first child. She put both babies in the laundry basket and covered them up with blankets. Lowe said she never checked the sex of the child, but both babies appeared to be full term and weighed about 5 to 6 pounds. Lindsey was charged with first-degree murder. Women with unwanted pregnancies have several options, including a safe haven law that allows newborns to be dropped off at places like hospitals and police stations. There is no excuse for murder. Let's break it down a little further. You find yourself pregnant and are afraid that anyone is going to find out. You find out that abortion may or may not be legal in your state. Get yourself to a hospital. Don't give them your name at all and tell them you're about to have a baby and you can't tell anyone and you need help. You want to surrender your child under the safe haven law. If they try and probe you, tell them you want to remain anonymous. That is, no jail time, no guilt. Someone else will have the chance to love your baby. There is no excuse for murder. Our next case. For a young girl, life will never be the same. A childhood, yet again stolen at the hands of a mother. This 9-year-old lone survivor of a horrifying scene inside a suburban Atlanta home is learning that her father and 4 siblings are dead, and her mother has been charged with their murders. Diana Romero was found in the house in Loganville, Georgia, suffering serious injuries. She was taken to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Hospital and was in serious but stable condition. Diana's mother, Isabel Martinez, 33, was arrested after police discovered her husband's 33-year-old Martin Romero and 4 of their children, Isabella Martinez, 10, Dakota Romero, 7, and Dylan Romero, 4, and a 2-year-old Axel Romero, dead from apparent stab wounds. Isabel Martinez is charged with 5 counts of murder and malice murder, along with 6 counts of aggravated assault. Isabel turned down the need for an attorney, and you can actually see her in the courtroom telling the attorney that there is no need for an attorney. This is God's way. And then, with a big smile, she gives a thumbs up to the camera. What prompts a person to take the life of someone so innocent? This is a horrendous crime, not only for the victims, but for the extended family, neighborhood, and community. Martinez was immediately taken into custody after police responded to the home at around 4:45 a.m. The caseworker spoke with Diana at 12:15 p.m. on July 10th. Before she opened up to the caseworker about the attacks, the child talked about having fun on a beach in Savannah. She said her mother and father did not fight while the family was away. She said her mother seemed normal when they all came home. Diana said the police had never come to her home before. As she began to speak about that night, Diana cried. The report said, she said everyone seemed to be asleep when the trouble started. She said she saw her mother take the knife out of the kitchen and start cutting her brothers and sisters. Her father rushed into the living room and tried to get help, but when he was walking to the door, she cut him too. Diana told the caseworker that watching all this before her, she could not move. She said her mother was not crying or screaming during the stabbings. She said her mother called the police after she cut herself. 5 of the family members were dead when police arrived at the home in the pre-dawn hours. Martinez said that before police arrived, she placed all the bodies in the same room so that they could be together. In a subsequent court appearance, Martinez exhibited bizarre behavior. The attorney for the woman said that she will not undergo. Isabel Martinez pled guilty to the crimes and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Our next case. Kris Rezireksyon. The girl said she did not have fun while living with her biological mother. And on the witness stand at the murder trial of her birth mother, Chrysla Rezireksyon, the 11-year-old Christina described a life inside the family's Irvington apartment 5 years ago that was defined by hunger and punishment. While living with her mother and her roommate, Christina, then 7 years old, said she and her siblings, 8-year-old Christiana and 6-year-old Solomon, went days at a time without eating. The children were whooped and forced to hold books over their heads while kneeling on metal grates from a stove, she said. They were tied by their ankles with ropes to a radiator while the mother was out of the apartment, she said. When the questions turned to the morning of May 22nd, 2011, Christina began to cry. On that day, she recalled seeing her sister's lifeless body in the living room of the apartment. We were trying to wake her up. She was dead. Authorities ultimately determined that Christiana's death was a homicide, leading to murder, child endangerment, and related charges against the mother. A medical examiner had determined that the girl died from severe malnutrition and an untreated broken femur. Kris Rezireksyon, who was 34, is also accused of abusing and neglecting Christina and Solomon, whom authorities have said were starved and sustained fractures that also went untreated. When Christina was called as a witness, her mother became emotional and began sobbing before the girl entered the courtroom. Soon after, Superior Court Judge Michael Rabin instructed the jury to leave the courtroom, and all parties waited for Kris Rezireksyon to regain her composure. After the jurors returned to the courtroom, Christina took the witness stand and began describing what life was like during 2011 inside the family's Chancellor Avenue apartment. Christina, who was originally known as Christina Glenn, recalled the apartment was white, and she was dressed in white clothes. As for the furniture in the apartment, Christina said she remembered a bed in her biological mother's room and a rug, a table, chairs, and a stove in the kitchen. The children did not go outside very often, she said. They never went to the front of the apartment building and played, and they never went to the park, she said. Were you allowed to play? The assistant prosecutor, Don Simonetti, asked Christina. No, she replied. Christina indicated she was always hungry. The children were only given soup to eat in the apartment, and sometimes they did not eat for days, she said. Sometimes we wouldn't eat at all. While their mother was out of the house, Christina said that she and her siblings were tied by their ankles with ropes to a radiator. Before the mother left the residence, she placed the soup in plastic containers and told the children to eat at noon. Christina said they were tied up every day from morning hours until she came home after it was dark outside. And while they were tied up, Christina said the children would do their homework, but they never finished it because they always fell asleep. She said they never got enough sleep because at night all they do is pray. Simonetti asked what she would do if she had to go to the bathroom when they were tied up, and Christina said she would have to use a bucket that was placed near them. Christina said Solomon would free himself from the rope and get more food in the kitchen. We all did it, and we got whooped. She said the children also got in trouble for not finishing their homework. As forms of punishment, Christina said the woman would hit the children with a belt, a brush, and a cord, and the children had to hold books above their heads and kneel on metal grates from a stove. And at some point, Christina said that she and her siblings could not walk and were then dragged by their hands and arms. It hurt, she said, describing how her body felt when she was unable to walk. We all got beaten. Rezireksyon Kris legally changed her name in order to match the pastor's name. The children's names were also changed to Christiana, Christina, and Solomon Rezireksyon. During her testimony, Christina spoke about interacting with the pastor and said he never hit her or the siblings. He treated us nice, she said. The detectives indicated that the 3 children looked frail, but Kris said, they look healthy to me. They fasted on the weekends by only eating soup. I don't beat them. I tap them sometimes. I used my hands, not a belt. She obviously was in denial of any wrongdoing that she had done to the children. Kris Rezireksyon was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Our next case, Elizabeth Escalona. There is a harsh silence in the courtroom, and hearts have been pushed to the limit for all who are in the courtroom. The judge begins. It comes down to one single fact. On September 7th, 2011, you savagely beat your child to the edge of death. And for that, you must be punished. A Dallas woman who beat her 2-year-old daughter and glued the toddler's hand to the wall was sentenced to 99 years in prison by a judge who describes his decision as a necessary punishment for a brutal, shocking attack. Elizabeth Escalona broke down crying as her sentence was handed to her. Prosecutor Erin Price, who originally offered Escalona a plea deal for 45 years, had argued that she now thought the 23-year-old woman deserved life. The beating left Jocelyn Cedillo in a coma for days. Escalona's other children told authorities that their mother attacked Jocelyn due to potty training problems. Police said she kicked her daughter in the stomach, beat her with a milk jug, then stuck her hands to the apartment wall with superglue. Jocelyn suffered bleeding in her brain, a fractured rib, multiple bruises, and bite marks, the doctor testified. Some skin had been torn off her hands, where the doctors also found glue residue and white paint chips from the apartment wall. Escalona pled guilty in July. Price said Escalona would be eligible to apply for parole in 30 years. The prosecutor sought to portray Escalona as a liar, a monster, and an unfit mother. She forced Escalona to look at enlarged photos of the bruises her attack left on Jocelyn. Price argued that if a stranger had beaten Jocelyn in the same way, no one would hesitate to give that person life in prison. Escalona had mishandled a beautiful gift of a daughter and failed to recognize what she had done. During a sentence hearing that began, prosecutors presented gruesome photos and details of the attack. Jocelyn was hospitalized for about a week with injuries including bleeding on her brain, a fractured rib, severe bruises, and other likely causes by direct blows, according to Dr. Amy Barton, a former child abuse specialist at Children's Medical Center of Dallas. When I think about the time involved in that, what that scene must have looked like, it's overwhelming. Barton said Dallas police Abel Lopez, who interviewed Escalona after the attack, showed a bottle of superglue taken out of the family's apartment, as well as a section of the apartment wall with Jocelyn's handprints. In a videotaped interview with Lopez after her attack, Escalona insisted over and over, "I'm taking the blame." Lopez said that Escalona wouldn't immediately explain why she was taking the blame, even as doctors fighting to save her daughter's life needed information about what had happened. She never really asked about Jocelyn's condition. Lopez said, "I had to tell her." Escalona's mother, Ophelia Escalona, testified about her panic and confusion when she arrived at the family home after the attack and found Jocelyn lying on the floor, taking shallow breaths. Under questioning from prosecutor Erin Price, Ophelia Escalona acknowledged that her daughter had also hit her several times when Elizabeth Escalona was growing up. The grandmother said she came over after her daughter called. She said she could see something wrong in her daughter's face. "I had my daughter in front of me, but she was not all there," Ophelia Escalona said. Her voice is often breaking throughout her testimony. She picked Jocelyn up off the floor and noticed that the child had soiled her underwear. The grandmother said she changed Jocelyn, ran with the girl to the car, and told her son to drive them to the hospital. But Jocelyn then started talking and asking for food, leading her grandmother to believe that the girl didn't need to go to the emergency room. She told her son to turn around and made a horrible mistake. Ophelia Escalona said. Testimony then concluded for a day, because Ophelia Escalona had to pick up another one of her grandchildren from school. The grandmother is now taking care of her daughter's 5 children, including a baby born this year. As testimony ended, Elizabeth Escalona used 2 tissues to wipe her eyes. Elizabeth Escalona received 99 years for the abuse of Jocelyn Sedilla that left the child in a coma. Our next case. Mollie Shouse. In what prosecutors believed is the first murder conviction in Jefferson County related to the death of a child in a hot car, the jury recommended a 35-year sentence for Louise's mother, Mollie Shouse. A jury found Shouse guilty of murder and other charges for the death of her 2-year-old son, Kenton Brown. Shouse's attorney, Patty Eschner, claimed the death was accidental and that her client was completely remorseful for the death of her son. It was the worst day of her life. I tell you, we are disappointed with the verdict, and we will be filing an appeal on her behalf. We are relieved that the jury told her that she murdered her son, said Mackenzie. Prosecutors argued Shouse was high on marijuana and Xanax when she left her son, Kenton Brown, in a car for several hours and passed out in her Linden apartment. The child was found hours later in the car seat. Neighbors tried to revive him but couldn't. It was very emotional for everybody, and it was hard to see some of the things we saw, said the jurors. One of the jurors, Jones, said the jury wanted to send a message because of what he called an indifference of human life. He claimed the evidence against Shouse, especially the talk of her repeated drug abuse, was just too much to overlook. She's definitely remorseful. Like I said, it was the worst day of her life. She'll punish herself more than any jury could. But Jones says the jury didn't believe that. I have my concerns about that. I know she lost a child, but oh my God, she didn't show much remorse, Jones said. The jury's recommendation included 28 years for murder, a number with added significance. The 28 years came from the fact that she lived 28 years and Kenton did not have that opportunity. Jurors also found Mollie Shouse guilty of endangerment, criminal abuse, and possession of a controlled substance. The jury took just 2 hours to make its decision. It was unconscionably indifferent, said attorney Erin Mackenzie. She put her own desire to get high above the basic human needs of her own child. And in Jefferson County, that is murder. Shouse originally told the police that she had gone shopping at the mall, to Wendy's, Thornton's, and then back to her apartment with her son, before he was found dead in her car outside the apartment. However, she switched her story numerous times when talking to the police. Everything has changed from the first time you told the story. Every little thing is changed. Detective Kristen Downs with Louisville Metro Police told Shouse in a taped interview, shown during the trial. Early on, Shouse told police the morning that this happened, she and Kenton ran errands and then were planting flowers. He was playing, and he was jumping out of the car. When police questioned Shouse about what she was doing as Kenton was in the car alone, she told them that they were about to leave, and she went inside to change pants. I was actually on my way out the door, said Shouse. However, later in the interview that changed, Shouse admitted to changing her stories to the police but defended her actions, saying she was so upset at the death of her son that she couldn't be held responsible for what she was saying. Prosecutors Erin Mackenzie said this case is different from a case where a child dies in a hot car because of a babysitter thinking the child will be fine, or a parent who has a sudden change in routine that makes them accidentally forget their child is in the car. Mackenzie says Shouse wantonly murdered her son because of her decision to do drugs. Shouse could receive 20 to 50 years in prison or even life. During closing arguments, Shouse's attorney tried to convince jurors that she was not guilty. She told the jury while on the stand that she was a drug addict, but that does not make her a murderer. Eschner said in court, and she also pointed out that Shouse finally admitted that she passed out on Xanax when her son was left in the car, but that it was an accident. The attorney said Shouse was a good mother, but then pointed out that Shouse didn't bother to get a hold of her son after his death, or even go to his funeral. She said that Shouse was doing the best she could as a single mother, but made the worst decision and will punish herself for the rest of her life. During its closing arguments, the prosecution said that Shouse knew the consequences of taking drugs and called her crying, sobbing fits in the courtroom manufactured. How the hell do you not go to your child's funeral? Kenton Brown died from environmental hypothermia. Our last case is Chacon Dooley. A South Carolina mother pled guilty to killing her 2 young sons by suffocating them, then putting their bodies into a car and rolling it into a river. Chacon Dooley, 30, pled guilty without making a deal with prosecutors. She faced between 30 years and life in prison. Divers pulled the bodies of 2-year-old Devin and 18-month-old Javon from North Edisto River on August 16, 2010. Dooley initially told police she fell asleep at the wheel before the car went into the river about 40 miles south of Columbia. But authorities questioned her story after finding no skid marks or signs of a crash. Later, police said Dooley told them that after being badgered by her sister and mother about her failings as a parent, Dooley fled with her sons to a motel, where she held her hands over the boys' mouths as they struggled for their life till they stopped breathing. Dooley claims to have had an out-of-body experience and not remember any of it. Dooley's relatives and attorneys have said the young mother was depressed, out of a job, and failing online classes. Appearing on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Dooley was in a manic state and irate after a family fight. Dooley's attorney told Winfrey that Dooley was distraught, in part owing to a lack of contact with her children's father. She tried to kill herself the night of her son's deaths by consuming a dozen packages of a common headache remedy and trying to slit her wrists with a box cutter. When those attempts failed, Dooley intended to die inside her car in the river before changing her mind and climbing out. Her children didn't have the same last-second decision. Diane Sanford, psychologist and co-author of Life Will Never Be the Same, The Real Mom's Postpartum Survival Guide, talks about how these illnesses can sometimes cause mothers to snap. In an interview, she was asked these questions, and by the way, I read this book, and it is an amazing book. And if you are a mom suffering from postpartum psychosis, in fact, it's normal to have postpartum, but there are so many women who are suffering from actual postpartum psychosis. So if you feel like what you're feeling is a little abnormal, please pick up this book. Let's begin. She's asked, what can you tell me about women who are driven to kill their own children? She says, in general, women who kill their own children tend to be not in their right minds and typically are experiencing some sort of psychotic episode where they have delusions and think that there is something evil or wrong with their children. In other situations, the moms are convinced that life is evil or that the devil is after them. Why do we see this more from women who have younger children? Early in new motherhood is a particularly vulnerable time for women. We do see higher incidences occur within the first year to several years. Is that something that we can credit to postpartum depression? Yes, but postpartum depression is different from postpartum psychosis. With postpartum depression, women do not kill their children unless they're having depression with a psychotic episode. By definition, women are at risk for postpartum disorder for up to 12 months after childbirth. However, because many of these conditions go under or untreated, they can be vulnerable for years. I'm not saying that I can tell that Dooley had postpartum psychosis because she had a 1 and a 2-year-old, but I would say that she was clearly in a confused and desperate state of mind. In Dooley's case, it seems like she had gone to pretty great lengths to cover up what she had allegedly done. However, How do you determine whether or not psychosis is a factor in a case like this? I think when the mother attempts a cover-up, people tend to believe that psychosis is not a part of it. But again, what we see is that women suffering from postpartum psychosis go in and out of psychotic thinking. When they come to, they're really horrified. Some women, like Dooley, who are charged with killing their children, do not have prior criminal records. What is the right thing to do with them? Do we send them to jail? The first thing to do is to evaluate the women within a short time after the incident occurred by a licensed mental health practitioner who is trained to do the assessment of people. You must make a determination of their mental health status. Then I think based on that assessment, the women need to get treatment for any existing mental health problems. Once she's recovered, she is to be held accountable for what has happened. If it's determined that she was in her right mind, then she was in possession of her mental faculties, that this was premeditated, then you need to take that information into account. I think in too many of these cases, women aren't evaluated at all, or investigators wait for weeks or months so that the women have started on medicine. Of course, they're thinking clearly by then. You have to make a medical assessment at or near after the incident occurs so you can determine to what degree she's going to be held accountable. Are postpartum disorders treatable? Absolutely. New Jersey initiated a screening and an early intervention program for pregnant and postpartum women, where hospitals and some doctors' offices are required to screen women for their emotional health during pregnancy and postpartum, up to their 6-week checkup. With screening and early intervention, we can identify vulnerable women and we can treat them with a combination of medicine, counseling, and social support. If they get the treatment they need, there is close to 100% recovery rate. Are most states adopting a plan like this? It's becoming a trend. I think that 38 states now have some kind of screening program. It's not necessarily mandated or required like it is in New Jersey. In some states, it's just recommended. But if women admit to having postpartum depression or especially postpartum psychosis, aren't they at risk to lose their children? Sure they are. That's why women, even with postpartum depression, hesitate to report their feelings and difficulties. Part of what we need to do as health providers is to take appropriate steps to provide services that the women need and to appropriately provide a safe place for their children in the interim, if needed. It's more the family and friends that pick up on something being wrong than the mother, especially if she's delusional, because then she's convinced that this distorted reality is the way things really are. But do friends and family know whom to contact if they suspect a mother they know is slipping? Most people don't, and that's why most of these women end up in these sort of unfortunate circumstances that then become the subject of news stories. No, they don't know who to reach out, but what we encourage in my book for a new mom is, if it's been a period of a couple of weeks where she doesn't feel like herself, that she may be experiencing depression or anxiety, call a health provider. That could be her OBGYN, a childbirth educator, or a nurse in the hospital where she delivered. She needs to alert a health provider that she is not feeling right. In addition, tell a friend or a family member so that she can get the support she needs. So there you have it. Please look into this book if you are somebody or you know somebody who is slipping. And sometimes it could be us who's listening. It's very important that you get help. Or at least give yourself time to rest. And know that you're not alone and there's plenty of support out there. Again, at any time, you can walk into a hospital and demand help. Thank you for listening to today's show. If you're enjoying the show, please follow along for more episodes. You're listening to Monsters and Mothers.
Thank you for listening to Monsters and Mothers. Subscribe to hear more chilling accounts of mothers who commit unspeakable horrors.